My name is Imran, and I work as a scientist in Qatar Computing Research Institute. And today I'm going to talk about the role of social media and artificial intelligence for disaster response. So with this talk, I'm going to convince you all, those who are not convinced, to use new emerging tools in addition to the traditional tools that you have been using for crisis response. So this talk is about three main topics. First of all, we are going to go through and see what is the role of information in crisis response. And then we'll see that how we can get that information, for example, from social media platforms. And in particular, I'll be talking more about microblogging platforms and the availability of various types of information and the opportunities that are available with that information. Finally, I'll focus on the role of artificial intelligence for the same reason, and we'll see how AI is useful for disaster response, various AI techniques, approaches, and tools. And I'll also describe our work in Qatar on crisis computing, ongoing work, and future directions. So this is a map that shows most affected countries by natural disasters from 1995 to 2015. You can see there are two circles here. The green circles show top 10 countries with highest proportion of affected people over the total population per 100,000 inhabitants. The orange or red circles show top 10 countries with the highest absolute number of affected people in millions. Unfortunately, the country where I belong is also among this list. I belong to Pakistan, and you see that 55 million people got affected by natural disasters within this period. And we have natural disaster throughout the year, and that is one of the motivations that I'm doing this research. In addition to that, you can see the top most affecting country is China, with around 2,200 million people affected in this period. So this shows something. This shows the human suffering. And with that, the human suffering from the impact of disasters are immeasurable. And with millions of people affected each year by disasters at an annual cost to the global economy exceeding 300 billion USD, make us need to think, and we need to think fast. We all know that disasters are unavoidable, but planning can lessen their effects. In order to plan, we need to act fast and provide some helping hand to the affected people and affected regions. And for that, we need to act. This is the letter, a very recent letter from the President of the United Nations General Assembly, Mr. Mogens Likitov, to the all permanent representatives of United Nations on the urgency to act against the human suffering, economic damage by disasters. He put some statistics there that I summarize on the left side. It says between 2008 and 14, 184 million people displaced by natural disasters, over 60 million due to conflicts, with an average 26.4 million each year. So by showing this, he urged to the permanent representative countries to act and save humans and regions from disasters. But there is one thing that we need to have to to enable the proper disaster response. So for an effective planning, we need as complete information as possible. Without information, we cannot do much. And looking back over the events of 2004, before social media came into being, it is striking to me that how many of disasters, deaths, medical emergencies could have been avoided by better communication with the affected people and with the affected regions. On this right side, you can see an image. This is a real image, by the way, taken during Indian tsunami that shows people-to-people communication who are communicating alerts and warnings to the people about that tsunami. So even with that type of communication for tens of thousands of people, disaster arrived suddenly and unannounced. Why is it that? The opaqueness induced by disasters is overwhelming. People need information as much as they need food, water, and shelter. And lack of information can make people victims of disasters and targets of aid. With that, I'm going to share with you a story, personal story of Mr. Ian Logan, former head of Disaster Operation International Federation. So he said, during earthquake in Salvador in 2001, the very first thing you need to do is climb into a helicopter. You can't get to see how many people are buried, but you get an eagle's eye view. You can see which airfields are working, which bridges are down. After 3 to 4 hours in a helicopter, I had to complete overview of the geographical extent of the disaster, the logistics involved, the population centers, also where not to send people. Then you must get down on the ground to get the quality or to do the disaster response. So that's how people used to grab the severity, the information for a particular disaster. So this shows that information bestows the power. We are going to see next, can social media be that source of information which can enable us to do the effective disaster response? And that's the second part of my presentation, the role of social media for crisis response. There are hundreds of social media platforms. Few here I listed, some famous platforms: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Google+, LinkedIn. Different types of information is posted on these platforms, some in type of textual messages, videos, images. People follow each other, they make communities, and they get connected with each other within a very narrow time window. And those people are in millions. You can see the statistics. This is the recent taken in 2015. All right. How these social media are helping us? Who can forget the Christchurch earthquake in New Zealand and the destruction that it brought to the region and deaths, human sufferings? After that earthquake, a self-organized workforce of 10,000 volunteers used Facebook to gather information about the disaster, reports of affected people, and they planned well the coordination to dispatch volunteers to the affected areas to help humanity. They identified which areas in that region are most affected. So by getting information from the volunteers again, and that's how they were organized in this social media. So this is a great example for us that the use of social media. The role of Twitter during Thailand floods. This is a study published by Alisa et al. Shows here on the left side the use of Twitter platform across different months. So the flood actually hit the city in October, and you can see the red line shows the percentage of increase of the use of Twitter throughout these months, and we can see the highest usage in that very month. They collected this data, they did some analysis, and they also showed what type of data is in that Twitter that people are posting about. They found some situational announcement and alerts, support announcements, requests for assistance, and requests for information. So they found that the data has very valuable nuggets that one can extract and enable their effective crisis planning. Not only that people use Twitter to gather information during crisis, but Twitter also breaks event faster than the traditional channels. Hudson plane crash, everybody knows. The first report about this crash, the first public report, many people actually called 911 and so on, but the first public report was through Twitter. So this guy tweeted, "There's a plane in the Hudson, I'm on the ferry going to pick up the people, crazy." Westgate Mall attack. Twitter breaks the story 33 minutes before a local TV channel. And someone wrote, "Gunshots in Westlands," and so on. Boston bombing. First report on the left side. Explosions at Complay. So you can see the picture and the smoke in the picture. This is, I guess, the second explosion, and this is really near real time. So Twitter breaks that to near real time. These two tweets on the right side were posted after first minute, and this tweet was after 2 minutes by Fox Sports. So we can see that not only social media, and most importantly, the micro-blogging platforms such as Twitter is being used by people to spread information, but it is also can be used for time-critical situations. So if you need information within a narrow time window to enable your decision-making process, you can trust on these platforms. So what is the difference between past, before social media, and now, how things have been changed? On the left side shows the before picture. So a disaster event happens, responders respond to that. After that, they call a press conference, and that's how we get to know, the general public, from TV stations or TV channels, that something has happened, someone is in need of some donations, or there are some needs of volunteers and so on. But that is already too late. On the right side, this shows how social media changed the things. So now an event happens. The first people who get to know about that event are us, our general public, through social media. Most of the responders also get to know from social media that something has happened. And then also the mainstream media, the press conferences and so on, get valuable information from social media, from general public, who are on the scene, who are looking or having a close eye on the event as progressing. So this shows that how things have been changed after the social media came into being. All right. So next, I'm going to show you what information is available in Twitter. What kind of information is available in Twitter? We did some analysis of Twitter crisis-related data, and we found something very useful. So these are some disasters happened in 2012. Colorado wildfires, Guatemala earthquake, northern Italy earthquakes, Manila floods, Typhoon Pablo in Philippines. In total, we had 13 crisis data sets from Twitter. We analyzed over 100,000 tweets, and we were looking in two types of information. One, what is the type of information in Twitter, like whether it is a report, it is a need, or it is a report of a need of donation, it is a warning, it is a report of some affected people, infrastructure damage, and so on. This is one set of information that we were interested in. In addition to that, we were also focusing on who is tweeting that. Like, are those guys who are tweeting belong to news media, eyewitness people, NGOs, government sources, or general public? Now you can see, so these circles, the bigger the circle, the more the proportion of that particular thing. For example, Manila floods in the Philippines, you can see this circle, 38% of the data that we collected was on needs and donations of those people. So this is very significant. This shows something. Then on this side, you can see there are many big circles here. 60% of the data in Guatemala earthquake was coming from news media personnels. 42% of the data during northern Italy earthquake was coming from general public. So you see here the trend. In most of the cases, general public is posting more than the other types of users of social media. This is 2012. This is the analysis of crisis happened in 2013. So these crises includes Alberta floods, New South Wales, Bohol earthquake, Colorado floods, Manila floods, Queensland floods, Sardinia floods, and super typhoon Yolanda in Philippines. Same type of information and sources were our focus point. We were interested in what type of information and who is tweeting that. And you can see the pattern is more or less similar. General public is posting more, and there is the variation here. 44% needs and donation, 52% in Bohol earthquake were about sympathy and support and prayers, and 41%, for example, is about some other useful information. So this is, so we in addition to the concrete categories, which are these ones, we had a category called other useful information. So if a tweet does not belong to any of these categories, and it still has some useful information, some important clues for responders to use, we categorize it like this. So this has many important things, and this needs another in-depth analysis to dig down to see what really it has. So the trend is clear. People post about many different types of useful information, and most of the general public is posting with that information. So the next graph shows you all this thing together to just give you the high level picture. Here we can see 36% of the data is coming from general public. 25% of the data is about other useful information. And for example, 15% is about affected individuals, 17% in total about needs and donations, and so on. So this is the cumulative picture. Next, we were interested, in addition to those information needs and who is tweeting about that, we were interested to see whether the information in Twitter in lines with one of the humanitarian agencies or not. This picture shows UN OCHA humanitarian clusters that they have created for their decision-making process. So they have different varieties of categories or clusters you can see: health, logistics, nutrition, protections, shelter, water and sanitations, early recovery, education, and emergency telecommunications, and so on. So these are the categories or clusters not made by us, but by UN OCHA. So we were interested to see whether the Twitter data that we have has answers to these things or not. That's our next study. Guess what? We found something very useful. We performed analysis of more than 440,000 tweets during the first 48 hours of Typhoon Yolanda. And we found 15% of the tweets were really potentially related to the information that is required by UN OCHA, for example, the cluster that I showed you earlier. These are some sample tweets and the percentage here. So you remember that one of the clusters were about education and child welfare. We found 4.1% of the tweets were about this cluster. 3.3% were about early recovery, and 1.8 telecommunication, and so on. By the way, so all these studies and analysis were also published by the World Humanitarian Data and Trends by UN OCHA, the magazine that they publish. So on the remaining clusters, so 0.2 were about health, 0.3% were about water and sanitation, and so on. Not only, it shows two things. So not all the data that people post on Twitter or social media platforms is directly related to the emergency response efforts. There are some fake information, rumors, false information, and so on. And there is a very tiny set of tweets where are about this useful information. So the challenge here is to how do we extract those things. So what else is in the Twitter data? We again did an analysis of Sandy hurricane Twitter data. This is to see what else is there in addition to the clusters that I showed you. So these are the 4 sample tweets. If we look closely, we see that the first tweet is of personal nature, right? Someone is saying, freaking out, home alone, will just watch TV, Sandy hashtag. This is it. However, if you see the last 3 tweets are kind of informative. Okay, the second tweet says, some Twitter handler orders closing of New York bridges, only Staten Island bridges unaffected at this time, and so on. And someone is posting here about the missing thing. So if we closely look into this thing, this tweet is about caution and advice. Many people in the area can use that thing. This is very helpful, right? This is about casualties and damage and missing people. This is about the need of donations in the form of volunteers. So there are so many important information in social media that one can get. I highlighted some useful nuggets in those tweets that must be extracted to inform our decision-making process, for example. So these different colors shows you the importance of the pieces in these tweets. All right. So next, we studied a different kinds of analysis. We collected data from Twitter about MERS outbreak, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome. You know about this outbreak. We collected this data in 2014, around 215,000 tweets. We have more than that, but we only consider these tweets for the analysis. And we were interested about these different directions or different types of information, which are reports of symptoms. We wanted to see if there are some reports of symptoms about this disease, reports of affected people, death reports, prevention questions, disease transmission reports, or treatment questions. So these are all very, very important pieces of information that one can extract and can enable many, many different types of decision-making processes. Okay, what we found from our analysis is something like this. Again, I'm showing you some concrete tweets. This is the ground truth data. So the first tweet, you can see the first 3 tweets about signs and symptoms. Someone is saying 2 workers at Florida hospital exposed to a patient with Middle East are showing flu-like symptoms. So someone is reporting someone got affected, and these are the symptoms. Second tweet, symptoms include fever, coughing, shortness of breath, congestion in the nose and throat, and in some cases, diarrhea. The third tweet, symptoms are fever and so on, so similar like that. The fourth tweet is about the affected individual. Someone reported someone got affected due to this outbreak. Saudi Arabia finds another 32 MERS cases as disease spread. What else we found? Affected individual again. First case of deadly Middle Eastern virus found in the US. So this shows many other dimensions. So someone found some cases in the US. So it's spreading from regions. Third case of MERS confirmed in the US. All right. So this is an ongoing thing. So we have the first report, we have the third report. I believe we have the second report somewhere in the data. Transmission, how it got transmitted. Someone reported about that. No clear transmission link between camels and humans for MERS. This is very significant for someone. So people who believe that it got transmitted from animals to human have some answers here. And this, I'm showing you one tweet for each category, or few tweets for each category. We have many tweets belong to each categories. Death reports. Saudi health authorities announced on Monday that the death toll from the MERS virus has reached 115. Significant information. I hope all of you now convinced that social media has some important information. If not, ISCRAM has a full-fledged track, social media studies. It's a prestige conference for crisis response efforts and practitioners. So these guys are considering and taking this thing serious. This is another convincing point. All right. We see that aid is out there. Aider is also out there. So people who want to help. And guess what? We have developed a tool, AIDR, Artificial Intelligence Disaster Response, is also out there. So I will in the next few slides, I'll show you what this technology is about. So that, with this, I shift to my third part of the talk, which is about the role of artificial intelligence for disaster response. We see that the importance of information. We see that social media has important information. Now the question is, how do we extract that information? This is the biggest question. I'm going to focus more on this part. All right. So data and opportunities. Earthquakes, floods, typhoons happens, disease outbreak happens, people post this information on social media. We have seen the proofs in previous slides. This gives us access to huge data sets. For example, during Sandy hurricane from October 27th to November 1st, around 4 or 5 days, 20 million tweets were posted. And this is only using one hashtag, which is Sandy and hurricane, 2 hashtags. And there are many other hashtags relevant to this, to that crisis, Sandy hurricane crisis. And so this is the official tweet from Twitter, by the way. It is not ours, not third party. This is the Twitter tweet. And then we see that information, not only the information is big, we have access to immense information or immense data, but the speed in which that information comes to us is also very high. So during Sandy hurricane, around 16,000 tweets per minute were posted by the general public on Twitter. So think if you employ some humans to process 16,000 small 140 characters of messages to look for important information, it doesn't work. Availability of data opens up the opportunities, many, many opportunities. We can use it for early warnings and event detections, situational awareness. We can extract actionable information. This can enable our rapid crisis response. And we can do post-disaster analysis and many, many more. I just listed here a few. How do we do that? The next question. Artificial intelligence is a big field. I'm not going to cover anything, all the things, but a few things here, very, very small tools. So I try to make this thing less technical and more understandable by everyone here. These are a few high-level computational approaches that one can use to do. For example, filtering, to remove duplicates. So people tweet and then retweets and duplicates and so on. Filtering can be used. Spamming can be removed. Bots can be removed by filtering. Classification, which is the categorization of the tweets coming from Twitter into different buckets. As I showed you some examples, caution and advice, infrastructure damage, casualties, and report affected people. Think those as a buckets or classes. So the classification helps you here. Clustering, to identify trending and emerging topics, is another artificial intelligence technique. Aggregation, when you have data from different sources, you can use aggregation techniques to make sense of, to connect those data streams and make sense of those data streams for different variety of purposes. Extraction, I showed you some nuggets in different colors. So extraction techniques work here. So that extraction techniques should be used to extract those snippet of focused information. Then summarization, very, very useful for situational awareness. So we see that there are many other, by the way. We see that we have more or less one-to-one or one-to-many mappings between what we need from humanitarian organization point of view and how AI can help us. But wait, before applying any of these techniques, you got to look at your data, what you have. So I showed you some ideal tweets, but this is not always the case. Twitter and other social media data is very noisy, and you have to face many different challenges, and for that you have to do many, many different types of pre-processing and stuff. I'm going to show you a few things here. So what are the data characteristics and preparations that we have to do? On Twitter, I'm focusing on Twitter for the time being. On Twitter, people use single word slangs. PLS means please. SRSLY means seriously. And then people also use multi-word slangs. IMO means in my opinion. I'm showing one example or two examples per each category. Misspellings are immense. MISSIN is the misspelled word. Actual spelling is missing. And OVRCME, overcome. Phonetic substitutions, people use that often. This is how most of the people on Twitter write tomorrow. And words without spaces. Often, because Twitter has a limitation, 140 characters. So people try to shorten their words, and they come up with different, because everybody has a different wisdom, so they come up with different types of combinations and spelling, substitutions, and so on, that bring more challenging for people like us, computer scientists, to deal with. Now this is very annoying, and can you guess what it is? It's a very easy example. It's very easy. Yes. This is, are you okay, mate? So that's how Twitter user posts the messages. And this is a very easy example. Now, we see that there are different approaches, AI approaches. We have to deal with some pre-processing. We have to remove the noise, spamming, and bots, and etc. By using these AI things, AI computational methods, people have developed some tools to process social media data. I'm going to show you a few of those. This slide shows 4 systems that process crisis-related data from different angles. The first one is Twitter's. It uses Twitter as a data source. It does the semantic enrichment of the Twitter data. Semantic enrichment is to make sense of a particular message that is more closer to what human can think or human understands. So for example, removing the slangs that I showed you. And they do classification automatically, and they also do geotagging. So the tweets that they get, they do semantic classification and geotagging. SensePlace 2 also use Twitter, do geotagging. They also visualize heat maps based on the geotags that they get. This is the interface. Immerse, enhanced messaging for emergency response sector. Use Twitter and SMS, machine translation, classification automatically, and they generate alerts. You see different varieties of purposes, and people have developed these things. ESA, emergency situation awareness. Use Twitter, detect bursts. So this is they use one of the clustering mechanism that I showed you earlier to detect the spikes and bursts in the data. Then they also do the classification, and they do geotagging too. Few more. Twitsident use Twitter and TweetPeak, semantic enrichment and classification. Crisis Tracker is another tool, very famous. Uses Twitter, do clustering, and human actually are used to annotate the data that they filter into different stories or categories, you can say. Twitter is another tool, uses Twitter as a data source. They also do classification automatically and extraction of information, and they also do the geotagging. Finally, AIDR, artificial intelligence for disaster response. This is the tool that I have developed, we have developed at QCRI. We also use Twitter, We do annotation of the tweets manually using humans in the loop, and we do classification automatically. I'm gonna, in the next few slides, I'm gonna focus on this tool and shows you how you can use this tool. It's very easy to use, and how you can inform many different types of decision-making process that all of you have in your mind. All right. People who have already used this tool may notice that we have a different logo. So this is a very recent deployment. We are extending this platform. We changed the logo and also the name a bit. So previously we had artificial intelligence for disaster response. Now we have artificial intelligence for digital response. This covers more areas, so this is just a tactical move. But still, the tool is under the umbrella of humanitarian computing. All right. So how did we come up with the idea, and why there was a need to develop this tool, and how we are different than the other tools? I'm going to highlight those things. Here, this is the, let's suppose this is the disaster timeline. Most of these tools that I showed you, they start collecting data from, let's suppose, the near real starting point of when the disaster happened. And they do the collection for weeks, for days. And these are the 4 traditional steps that many of these tools actually follows to do the classification. So the first step is the data collection. The second step is the human annotation. I'm assuming here we are using machine learning. Machine learning is a process to train machines to work as human work, right? So in order to train machines, we have to feed, we have to teach machines, right? So the human annotation here is the process in which we ask experts in the domain to get something useful for machines to teach. And then when machines are trained, they do the stuff. And in this case, classification, let's suppose. All right, so this is the traditional information processing timeline. We are different than that. There is a problem in it. So this requires you first to complete the data collection, like a couple of days or a couple of weeks, and then you'd follow these steps, and it is already over, the crisis is done, the human suffering is done, the damage is happened, and so on. So, but you do some post-disaster analysis. Most of these tools do that, and but this is not required for rapid crisis response. This is not how you deal with time-critical situations. So our aim was something like this. This is the time and the impact of a disaster, and the red line shows here the disaster event when it happens, and the dots here show the harm to the community in terms of deaths, medical emergencies, damages, and so on, what you can think of. This blue line here shows how the response is today. You can see this is how we are going on the timeline, and these points are the decision-making points. You can see there's a big gap between when the disaster happens and what the response timeline. So most of the harm to the community has already been done. And now we're triggering the response efforts, but it is useful, but it's not going to save much of the harm that we have seen here. So our target disaster response is something like this. We wanted to narrow this thing between when the disaster happens and the response timeline. So to lessen the community harms. And for that, what you need to do, you need to process the data in real time, in near real time. And this is very challenging. So this means we have to process 16,000 tweets per minute, for example, which I showed you were posted during Sandy hurricane. And we have to deal with all the challenges that I showed you, the pre-processing, the extraction, and so on, and get something useful out of it, right? So this requires really, this introduces some challenges to do that. All right. How is our approach now? The same disaster timeline. The 4 traditional processes: data collection, human annotation, machine training, and classification. How do we do that now? We start data collection from the event near real time, near to the event time when it happens. And we also start the human annotation right away. We use humans in the loop right away. So you see here, these arrows shows we involve human experts to start teaching machines immediately. So this is the machine learning arrows. These are the human annotation arrows. You can see here the human annotation starts from time t0, and after a few hours, our machine gets training. We get another batch of human annotation. We train machines again. We get another batch of human annotation. We train machine again, and this process goes on until we see that machines are good. They learn things well, and they are trustable. And the classification and the decision-making process can be started from that point, and it is very near to the time when the event happens. So this is still, there is a few hours gap, and this gap that I shows here, first few hours, because the human annotation take time. Humans, here we use volunteers from standby task force, and the activation time, contacting volunteers to help us train machines take few hours. But we managed to narrow the response and the suffering, the time when the disaster happens. And this year in ISCRAM, I target this. How do we actually get rid of this first few hours sleep of machines? So that was my target. That was my focus of this year's paper in ISCRAM. And thanks to ISCRAM that they see the value in it and gave me the best paper award. All right, so this is how we do. However, in order to do that, we have to face different challenges. And these are few famous 4 V's. They call it 4 V's: the volume, the velocity, variety, and the veracity of the information. We are facing a huge volume of information coming from social media. I showed you 20 million tweets in 5 days. And then velocity, we are dealing with 16,000 tweets per minute. Variety, people post different types of information on Twitter. We have to deal with that. And veracity is, not all the information on Twitter is trustable. So there are rumors, there are false information, and so on. We have dealt almost to acceptable level for the first 3 parts. We are working on the veracity part, and we are improving that. All right. As I showed you that in our process, we have humans in the loop. Why we have humans? There are 2 options. Once, if you have a data, there are 2 options to do. The first option is that you have a manpower, and you gather those guys in a room and give the data and ask them, please help us tell what this data is about. We have seen that social media gives you immense data and with the highest velocity that you can think. With that, if you have only humans in the loop or only humans that are doing processing for you, this introduces the filter failure problem. They will not be able to cope up with the speed that social media is going to give you. This is a big challenge. On the other side, if we only use machines, it's not going to help because the type of information in social media is so vague, variety is so huge that we have to make different types of machines for different types of purposes. So it also doesn't help us here. What we did in AIDR, we combined this machine learning and crowdsourcing together to hire experts, domain experts, to teach machines how to process that data and how to speed up that whole process. And I showed you how do we do that. Okay, once you have such setting where you have machines, this is very critical setting, where you have machines to train in real time, disaster is ongoing. You have a manpower of volunteers to get involved in the tagging process. This is a very sensitive settings. People have used different types of modalities to connect machines and humans together. For example, this picture shows you here, you have some input data, and you have some automatic processing elements, like machines. And you use humans only for the tasks which are very difficult for the machines, right? So machine handles the easy tasks, but once machines see that, okay, this task, this tweet is very ambiguous, I cannot handle, you pass that tweet to the humans, and then human does the job. This is one modality. Another modality here is that you have input data, you have automatic processing elements here, the machines, and then you have humans. This is used in banking setup, where the banks detect the frauds and the transactions which are not good. What they do, they have trained machines, and machine does the thing, and then they have humans who not always, but sometimes look at the data that machine is processing, and they detect and verify whether what machine is doing is accurate or not. This is another modality. This is the third one. There are many other. I showed you here some famous one. You have machines. Machine process something, and then you use humans to train again machines, because when humans see that machine is not doing good, they train again your machine, and then the machine asks human again, can you please help me classify this or categorize this or label that item? And this is a loop here. This is the modality, or this is the setting that we use in ADER. We have machines trained to do the job, the task that we have, but we still have humans in the loop. And we have a different type of machines here who actually ask human again if they face some difficult problems. I will show you the details how this works in later slides. First, I'm going to show you the tool and how it is useful for end users, practitioners, and so on. So this AIDR tool works in simply 3 steps. We collect data, we curate data by using humans, and we classify that. And this is the URL. You can go there and use that tool. It is open, online, hosted on our servers, and it is 24/7 available to be used by guys like you. By the way, last year, we won the grand prize in the Open Source Software World Challenge. And we were very proud and happy for that. Among the winners in the past years, there were some projects from MIT, Stanford, and Oxford, and we were very pleased to be among those winners, among those big names. And we were the first in the Middle East and in Qatar to bring this award. All right. So these 3 steps, how do we do these 3 steps, and how you actually use these 3 steps? Okay, the first thing is to set up a collection. So the first thing that you have to do, for example, you want to see what information is available on Twitter for a given event, let's suppose Zika virus, and you want to get something useful out of it that has in your mind, that is of interest to you. I cannot think of that. So it's your requirement. Everybody has a different requirement in this room, right? So we had to make the machine to overcome this issue. We were not thinking to bind and couple our machine to one specific requirement. We made it open, flexible. So everybody can use it, everybody can tailor this thing to be used for their own requirements. So in order to do that, you have to set up the collection. For example, we use Twitter as a data source now. A collection in Twitter, using Twitter data source, requires set of keywords. So you have to come up with the keywords. Let's suppose Zika virus or Zika or virus, something like this, or famous hashtags that you have in your mind in line with your requirement. Or what you can do, another option in our tool is to draw a geographical bounding box. You can say that I am interested only tweets that are coming out of Rio. So you can do that. You can also filter on languages. You can specify I am only interested in English tweets or Arabic tweets or any other Spanish tweets. You can also use follow some specific set of users, the users who you trust. So these are all options available to set up a collection in our tool. The second step that you have to do is to set up the classifiers. This is a bit technical term, but the classifier in simple terms is the categories or the requirements that you have in your mind. Let's suppose that out of Zika virus Twitter data, you want to know about the symptoms, right? Symptoms report. This would be a symptom classifier. So that we call a symptom classifier. And you can think of about, okay, reports of deaths due to Zika virus. That would be another classifier. So for such classifier, for example, these are few examples, damage and casualties, eyewitness accounts, and so on. You have to set up this thing. It's just simply telling machine that this is a concept or this is a kind of requirement that I want you as a machine to help me get data out of the Twitter data. All right. This is the very high level pipeline or architecture of the tool. Twitter, data source, the collector, I told you how to set up that. The tagger is the classifier thing. I told you how to set up that. And once you have that, there is a trainer, the humans part, right? So once you have the trainer, the tool actually does the classification into different classes, into different categories, and you can use for different variety of purposes. You can create maps, you can download Excel files, CSVs, or whatever requirement you have. So this is how it works. All right, let's get into the tool, and I show you how to create a collection. These are the interfaces. I showed you the collection part, how to set up that. This is the page where you put the keywords and hashtags here, and this is the interface where you put the bounding box around Rio, for example. And this is how you put the language filters, and you can put many language filters. You can specify that I am only interested in 5 languages, and you specify those 5 languages. The tool actually only gives you tweets belong to those languages. This is the dashboard for the status of your collection. It shows you, it's not clear here, the number of tweets downloaded, the status, and so on. All right, the next step is the classifier setup. Very easy to do that. So we guide you through the process. Once you start using the tool, you set up the collection, you set up the classifier. We have some already built-in classifiers. Classifier means the category, the classes. But you can create your own custom classifier by specifying just a name of the classifier and a description. Because this is why you need a description of a category or a classifier. You have a humans in the loop, right? So you need to give some context to the human that what is that category about. So what does symptoms means to the human? So you need to describe what you have to look into the symptoms and so on, right? So you provide names and a description. And for example, this I created a flu disease related classifiers, and these are the 3 categories. I was interested in getting tweets about flu, not about flu, and tweets which cannot be classified. So we have that category. So yes, no, and not related. All right. Now you have set up the collection, you have set up the classifiers. Now the stage is to train machines, right? Now you are training our machine to fulfill your requirements. And you have a requirement to get symptoms reports out of Zika tweets, let's suppose. We have 2 interfaces for human annotation. So you as an owner can use this interface to, this is the tweet shown here. These are the categories that you have created in the machine. And you are telling what this tweet is about, where this tweet belongs to any of these categories. So you are just reading the tweet, choosing one option from these 3. That's how you are teaching the machine. So once you click one of these 3 options and click on Save button, this helps machine trains. And you need few hundreds of those until you see that machine is behaving good. This is one interface. We have also a public interface, like public to the communities, bigger communities. We have Micromapper platform that you can use for bigger deployments, for example. UN OCHA uses that and other organizations to enable to have volunteers all around the world from standby task force to help you tag this thing. But this is specific to the humanitarian purposes. So if you want to do something slightly out of that humanitarian, you cannot use that. Anyways, we have a web interface here. We have a mobile clicker, people who are traveling and helping this stuff. We have that thing here. It again shows you the tweet and the categories. You choose one category, you submit, and you are training machine. So volunteers are training machines in real time. Same interface here. The tweet, the categories, you choose one category, and this is it. So let's suppose that you have trained the machine enough. This is the output of the machines. On this side, we show how humans have tagged, and on the right side, we show how machines have been classifying with the machine confidence and the categories and so on. It is very easy to use tool. Once you do that, we have also an operator manual online. You can use that, and if you have any queries, you can contact us too. We have people answering questions, queries, and handling issues regarding this tool. All right, before I get to the technical part and the AI part of this tool, I show you the high level, not really high level, but in-depth architecture of the tool. So we have data sources here. We are dealing with the stream of tweets, live stream of tweets, right? We have collector here, which you set up. We have a feature extractor here. Feature extractor is a component in our tool which converts each incoming tweet into a format that is understandable by the machines. This is it. It's not rocket science. We do some pre-processing here and things, but it converts the items into a format that is understandable by the machines. Now we have the classifier here that you have set up by yourself. and crowdsourcing task generator, who actually picks from the stream of the tweets that which task to crowdsource, right? Which tasks to ask humans to label. And then we have a trainer, a learner, who actually keeps learning as humans are tagging. So this is the process. Once machines are learned enough, we start outputting the data. With each data has a category, whether this tweet is about symptoms, affected people, and the confidence level too. Machine tells that I'm 90% confident that this tweet is about symptoms, or this tweet is about damage, and so on. Now, after showing you this, I'm going to go little into the depth of how we control quality and cost in our tool. So these are the two very important measures to satisfy our clients. For example, humanitarian agencies. We have to have good quality. We have to be within a manageable cost. What do I mean by the quality and cost? So quality here means the classification accuracy. The classification accuracy should be good, the higher precision or recall or AUC measure. And cost here is, for example, in two terms you can see there are two options. So you are having humans as a volunteer, then it means that you are using their time, which is sensitive, which is a cost in terms. So we are paying a cost in terms of humans' time to train machines. Another type of cost is money. There are many crowdsourcing platforms like Crowdflower, Mechanical Turk, and so on, to which you pay some money and you use humans all around the world to do your task. And that could be one of the tasks, to train machines. But in that case, the cost that you are paying is money. So our aim is to maximize the quality and minimize the cost. So how do we do that? We did some experiments, and this graph shows you some quality versus cost using two approaches. We have a passive learning approach and an active learning approach. So the passive learning and active learning, let me describe in a layman terms. So let's suppose that you are teaching your small kid about an elephant. So you are teaching that how an elephant looks like, right? You are telling that this is that part and this is this part and so on. And you are not asking your kid to ask questions. So this is the passive learning thing in machine. When you are just teaching machines without taking the answers from the machines. However, in active learning, you ask your kid also, please ask me the question to which part you don't understand, or which part is ambiguous to you. So there is a loop or circle that you are teaching something, kid is asking you something. This is the active learning, right? So these are the two steps. These are two type of experiments that we did. This is on the x-axis, we have labels. The labels obtained by the volunteers. And on the y-axis, we have machine accuracy. And we have two sets of experiments, one with the deduplication and one without and one with deduplication. So deduplication is a very essential process in Twitter in which you remove retweets and near duplicates. We can see that the active learning approach as compared to the passive learning, in which case you see it reaches to a level of 70% of AUC with around 800 labels. Whereas with the active learning approach, you get higher accuracy with little less number of labels. So having your human or kid in the loop to clarify a concept, let's suppose, because you are training your machines here, right? So you are telling your kid that what an elephant look like, and you are also having the questions from the kid helps you help kid understand things far more faster and better than the one-way communication. So that's why in our tool we use active learning. We ask human to train machines, but we also ask machines to ask humans, please train me on this aspect because I don't understand that part. All right. So this is in terms of quality, how we maintain good quality. How do we do in performance? These are the few experiments that we did. I showed you some component feature extractor and the classifiers and then the machine overall workflow. The first row here shows you the performance in terms of throughput, and this is the latency. Let me explain these two things. Throughput is the capability of machine to process the number of items in a given time unit. Like how many tweets can be processed in 1 minute. This is the throughput. Latency is the time taken by machine to process one item from input to the output. This is the latency. So you can see here, we maintain a very low latency, means that we take less time to process an item from its initial point to the final point, and we maintain high throughput, means that we process more items. And this tiny line shows you here the peak of Sandy hurricane, which is like 16,000 tweets per minute. We are far more better than that. So 16,000 per minute, around 250 tweets per second, but our tool is managed to handle around 500 tweets per minute. So we double the throughput. All right, with this, we use that tool for different major disasters with different crises. For example, during Typhoon Hagupit, UN OCHA deployed this tool to get information about requests for the help and needs, infrastructure damage, humanitarian aid provided or not. We created this map using our tool, using standby task for volunteers and so on. This was a successful, we have many other deployments. This was one of the successful deployments that we did. The Guardian covered that story for us. And we had some other media coverage too. All right, so recently we extended that tool to process a different type of source. And in this case, we are processing SMS. And similar, we can do WhatsApp and so on. So UNICEF in Zambia launched a program, U-Report, because every hour in Zambia, Zambia youth get affected by HIV and AIDS virus due to a lack of information about how the disease can be transmitted and so on. So UNICEF was interested in spreading the awareness, giving the awareness to the population, and they launched a U-Report project. And then in the recent years, they see that the U-Report project usage increased up to 300%. So they were not expecting that much increase. So having that much increase in the loop, because they had humans to process the SMS that is coming from, let me show you the workflow here. So they have a SMS short code advertised to the people in Zambia, and they ask people to send them queries and questions about AIDS and HIV. They have the U-Report platform which receives those SMS, and there are a force of manual humans here who actually receive this thing one by one and do manual processing, and they have doctors and experts of this HIV and AIDS who actually get an SMS and then advise to the people again if someone is asking about transmission or other symptoms of this AIDS disease. So that's how they do. So with the increase up to 300%, their manual approach to process this thing failed. So we extended our tool to help them process this thing. We replaced the manual people here, and we received the SMS from the U-Report project. Now we have machines there to process this thing automatically and redirect to the experts to answer. And this is so fast, and this is so successful in their eyes. And we published a paper together, and this was also covered in New Scientist magazine. Uh, uh, in addition to that, we had a media coverage about this tool. Nature, Forbes, Mashable, New Scientist, Gulf Times, CBC, Wall Street Journal, they covered us on this. All right, so this was the work that we have done until now. Next, I'm going to show you the ongoing work to extend this thing, these technologies, and develop new technologies in this humanitarian space. One of the most important thing in the processing pipeline of our tool is the human annotation. This is a very sensitive point, right? Why it is sensitive? Because you are dealing with two very crucial aspects. Because you have a stream of tweets coming in your tool. You need to select which tweet to ask humans, and you need to schedule when to ask humans. So these are two important points. I'll go one by one. The first task is labeling task selection. Labeling task selection is the process to select which tweet or which item to ask for the labels. And no duplicate task should be labeled. This is the aim, because we don't want humans to label again and again same tweet. This is annoying. And we aim to prioritize tasks that are likely to increase classifier performance. We have machines, right, in the loop. We don't want to ask junk tasks to the humans. We want to ask tasks, or we want to show up the tweets for which our machines get high accuracy, right? So this is the purpose. We did some tests here. We used these three, Juplin, Sandy, and Oklahoma labels, tweets. And we divided these tweets into different phases of disasters. This setting is specific to the task selection setting, and we wanted to get in-depth insights how this thing work or not. We have disaster pre-phase, we have disaster impact phase when the disaster actually happened, and we have disaster post-phase. This is the day-by-day distribution of Juplin, Sandy, and Oklahoma respectively, the number of tweets per day. All right, so in Twitter, there are around 29 to 70% of the tweets are retweets, and 60 to 70% of the tweets are near duplicates. This is a challenging part. If you need to pick up this task, you need to handle this stuff. So you need to pick up the novel tweet, which have not been seen by the machines or humans before. This is challenging. Then why to remove duplication? Because it causes an artificial increase the accuracy in the classification accuracy, because machine is getting trained on one thing and again. And most likely, if you have more duplicates in the pipeline, machine is telling you, okay, I'm doing good, but in fact, it is not doing good. And it also reduces the classifier bias, because classifier is biased to one concept or one area. We don't want to do that. We want to have a generic classifier, as generic as possible. And most importantly, it also increase the workers' experience. If you show same tweet again and again to the human workers, they will be annoyed. They will drop off. They will not help you. So we dealt with that. And here I show some accuracy with deduplication, without deduplication, and with deduplication. We can see that without deduplication, we get 78% accuracy, and with deduplication, we get little less. That's because of the artificial increase in the accuracy for the pre-phase, for the impact phase, and for the post-phase. So it is now evident that the task selection is a very crucial piece, and we have to deal with all these challenges, and for that we did these experiments. Now, these are a few another experiments which shows again the results from Joplin, Sandy, and Oklahoma crisis. Again, the phases, we have training sets on the x-axis and the accuracy on the y-axis. Again, with the passive and active learning approach. I'm not going to go into the deep of this stuff, but I'm just telling you the lesson learned. So the AUC stabilized with fewer training items using active learning. This is the thing, the finding that we found in other setting too. And here in this experiment, we also found that using active learning and deduplication, we reaches to the good AUC. Now the next thing is, now you know that which task you have to select. So among 16,000 tweets, which tweets you ask humans to label. You have that done. Now the next thing is when to ask. So now you have a list of tasks ready for humans to ask. Now when do you ask them? It's also very crucial. And it has implications. For example, we tested these three settings. Should we ask all the tasks at once? So let's suppose that some crisis happens, we collect data, and we get a list of 1,000 tweets to be tagged by humans. Should we ask all those things, all those tweets at once to the labels, to the humans? Or should we follow a cumulative labeling strategy in which we ask for each phase different labeling thing? So maybe each phase has a different semantic and machine can understand each phase more better. Or we use independent setting in which, for example, each phase we ask labels again and we discard previous labels. And we only train machines on the current labels. So these are the three settings that we tested. And these are the results that we obtained. And it shows something significant here. We had an informative classifier with full labeling data sets. We had another informative classifier with half of the labels from the previous. And we have a classifier that does the donation, tells you whether a tweet about donation or not. All right, so here the things are so this, the black, the gray, dark gray line is the strategy, all at once strategy. And this is the cumulative and this is the independent. We can see here in the informative 100%, informative 50%, all at once is winning, right? It's better to ask all of your label in the first stage for this type of classifier. However, for this thing, there are more of a cumulative strategy that seems better for donations. Why is it that? There is some insights and findings in it. Because when you are teaching machine about to separate a tweet being informative and tweet being not informative, this task is a bit easier for machines to understand. However, it is a bit hard for machines to understand, to tell you which tweet is about donation and which is not. Because this is a small concept, it has particularities, and we found that this is difficult for machines, and for that we have to have cumulative strategy. All right, so this was the work, the findings that we have. Now we are about to include this thing into the tool. Now, ongoing work, domain adaptation. So this is the work that I presented here in ISCRAM, my paper. If you remember, I showed you that we had this disaster timeline and the first few hours without machine doing anything. So this thing actually triggers machine to work in those few hours. So we have the machines ready from the time t0, from the time when the disaster happens. Domain adaptation is the ability of system to apply knowledge and skills learned in the previous domains, in the past domains, in the previous crisis, floods, earthquakes, typhoons, to the novel domains, to the new crisis that you are tackling now. And our goal is to build a system that can understand natural language for any type of crisis. This is the typical machine learning setting in which you have a training phase and you have a testing phase, the prediction. You are training machines. We have, for example, feature extractor, the feature extractor vectors. This is the machine, and this is the human labels. So you are feeding the tweets and labels to those, like this tweet is about damage, that tweet is about infrastructure, a machine gets trained. And now you are testing your machine against a different type of crisis. So here, for example, you trained on Manila floods, and here you are classifying floods in India, let's suppose. So this color, I tried to show you, this is a different event, and that was a different event. So that is the purpose to do that stuff, to enable machine to tag or classify data from a different event. So you get still the same labels that you have from previous thing, and you're still tagging that thing. Why it is challenging? A Thai example. If you are training your machines to understand what our apples look like, machine will be understandable. Machine will be happy to tell you if you ask machine, okay, what is this? And you have an apple in your hand, machine will tell you accurately. Same case, if you train your machine to tell how orange is look like, and you ask for an orange, machine will tell you this is orange. But if you are training your machines on apples, telling your machine how apples taste, how apples look like, their color, and so on, and you are asking orange about orange, machine will feel some problem. This is because they both have slightly different shapes, different colors, skins, and tastes, and etc. They are different features, right? So this is the purpose of this domain adaptation, to train machines from past events, for example, Italy earthquake, Queensland floods, and Sandy hurricane, to classify your future events, your new domains, novel domains. And this is challenging because the events are different. Your machines are trained on earthquake, and you are asking to deal with floods. The language of your earthquake in Nepal is different than the language of floods in Florida. The information needs were in Nepal were different by UN OCHA, and information needs in California earthquake by Red Cross is different. So we have to deal with that problem. So how did we deal? So let's suppose that these are apples and these are the oranges, and we are training our machines, and machine was able to draw a line and telling that, okay, these are the orange and these are the apples. And this is the ideal line for our domain, and let's suppose these are bananas, right? So this is the ideal case. You have to take your blue line in line with your red line. This is challenging. You are training you're tailoring your machine to understand how bananas are by training your machines on apples. There are two types of problems here. Maybe the orange and apple thing they are pretty much overlap in terms of circles, shapes, and so on. This would be easy problem. But apples and banana would be very, very hard problem because they have slightly different, completely different shapes, and so on. So there are some easy problems, there are some hard problems. If an earthquake happened in Philippines, and we train our machines, and again a flood happens in the Philippines, we get classification for that. This will be a little easy problem for machines as compared to classifying from one region to another region. All right, so we did some experiments. These are the little details of those experiments. We used single source, like we used one past crisis data to test, and then we use multiple sources. We use many past crisis data to train machine. And we also use some special cases. We trained our machine on Italian language. We tested our machine on Spanish language. So we wanted to see that how machine behaves, right? And with that, we found something like this. These are the observations and finding out of those experiments. We see that data from early hours of a crisis help. So let's suppose that you have a trained machine from all earthquakes from past. So a new earthquake happens. It is always helpful for machine to have a tiny piece of new earthquake data inside your training set. Past events of same type are always useful. If you're training your machine on earthquakes, you are dealing with earthquakes now, good. It will help. Same language data as target events is also useful. So if you're dealing with English, good. If you're dealing with different languages, it's a bit challenging. Similar languages also work if you don't have exactly same language. And we don't see any good results out of cross-domain. It is, again, a very challenging that you train your machines on floods and you're classifying earthquakes. This is not working as of now. All right, so what are the future directions for our work and for all of you maybe who are interested in doing this crisis informatics stuff, having in mind that we need to enable a rapid crisis response. One of the things that we want to do is to extend our tool to do the image processing for damage assessment. And for example, the task here is given images from Twitter, we want to see whether an image is about building, a bridge, a road, and so on. And we are also interested in, given a building image, what is the severity of damage in it, whether it's a low damage, it's a mild damage, or it's a high damage. So this is the task, this is the ongoing work, this is the future direction, and we just started that work. And hopefully, in the coming few months, we'll be able to inject this new research into our tool, and you will be able to classify also the images from social media. Another direction that we are heading is to use deep learning to improve our classification. Deep learning is a new, it's not really new, it's been there for ages, but it was not working because of the scarcity of data. Now, with the availability of big data and more labels and so on, this thing started working now. So we are looking forward to improve our systems classification accuracy using deep learning approaches. And Andrea this year has a short paper on using these techniques, and we are really looking forward to use what they have found and extend accordingly our tools. So yeah, this is with the availability of big data, one should start using this thing. This is a new latest thing. It gives more power to the machines because the automatic feature learning. So the traditional machine learning, you have to specify the features, like you have to tell the machines the shape of a fruit, the taste of a fruit, the color of a fruit. But in deep learning, you don't need to tell anything. Your machine will learn what are the prominent features of a given thing automatically and then gets trained. We want to do the binary and multi-class classification and testing data from multiple past events. So these are the few tasks that we are looking forward to do. Another future direction, and it is very, very crucial and very important, and I encourage people who do crisis informatics start working on this thing. This is the transfer learning case. So I showed you domain adaptation. Domain adaptation is to use the past events to train and predict future events. However, in transfer learning, which is more challenging, is that you have the data from past events, but the task of your past events was different than the task of your new event. Let's suppose we were finding things about UN OCHA clusters from Nepal earthquake, right? This is one of our past event. And now we want to use the same label data to fulfill the needs of Red Cross. So we were dealing with OCHA, now we have to deal with Red Cross to give them the useful information. This is the task. The task is different because both humanitarian agencies have a different information needs. So this is very challenging in our computer science stuff. So we are looking forward to learn from source to classify target by using semantic similarity between the task, instance similarity between the domains. Instances means tweets here. And then instance weighting and so on. There are different techniques that we need to explore. I encourage all of you to work on this thing. This is one of the very, very potential future thing to do in this crisis stuff if we want to switch our information needs from one region to another region, from one task to another task. We don't always deal with English data. We have to deal with language from Afghanistan, from Pakistan. So this is very important. All right. The fourth future direction is the summarization and prioritization of actionable information. Okay. We do the classification. We process thousands of tweets, and we found many tweets are useful. But not all of those guys are useful for humanitarian purpose until we find some actionable stuff out of it. Or we may use to summarize what an event is about and what's the situation in. So this is the kind of situational awareness where you have multiple things, multiple documents, multiple tweets in this case, and you come up with one tweet or one document summarizing everything about the event. So this is more closer to what, for example, you give a human 10 papers, 10 similar papers to review, and you ask human to write a 200 words report about all of these 10 papers. We are building a machine to do the same job. We are going to give machine thousands of tweets, and we are going to ask machine, please give us 200 to 800 words summary of all these tweets, what they are talking about, what is the situational awareness, and so on. So this is another very challenging task. And people, again, interested in crisis informatics should do that stuff. Because we are dealing with different stakeholders, we have different requirements, different goals, and some people are interested in high-level situational awareness. Some people are interested in low-level situational awareness. High-level means here what is the situation in event. And for example, someone says that give me only things about infrastructure damage. So this is rapid change between the requirements. All right. In order to do this thing, you need the basic fundamental thing is the data and resources. Otherwise, you can't do anything, right? You have AI, you have social media, but if you don't have resources, data sets, and tools, you can't do anything. And for that purpose, I'm taking this ISCRAM platform to announce that we have recently launched this resource website called Crisis NLP, Crisis Natural Language Processing. This is the website. You can go to that. We have published 52 million crisis-related tweets, around 50,000 labeled tweets into humanitarian categories, and we have published the first largest word-to-vec embeddings trained on all these 52 million tweets. And we have also out of vocabulary dictionaries, the things that I showed you, slangs, and so on. So these are all gradually available on this website. We have put something, but in the coming days, I'm going to put these things again. So you can use this source to inform your AI techniques, develop tools. This is for the research community. This is to advance, take next step in crisis informatics. There are some other resources, websites. For example, CrisisLex is one of those. They have crisis data sets from 26 different crises. You can also use that, but they only have labeled data. We have more than that, like we have also unlabeled data. Okay, finally I'm wrapping up. This is an upcoming book. I highly recommend that. It will be published in July. This is written by my favorite mentor, Carlos Castillo, who was in QCRI with me 3 years. Now he has a position in Spain, EuroCAD director. This is a very interesting and in-depth book, gives you in-depth insights. Book from Patrick Meyer, Digital Humanitarian, a famous book. And we have also paper from me on this ACM computing survey, which actually summarize all of these things that I talked about in detail. We see that which tools are capable of doing what, their advantages, pros and cons, and so on. We discuss in detail all of these things. All right. Conclusion. Information bestows power for disaster response. People need information as much as water, shelter, food. Disasters are unavoidable, but planning can lessen their effect. So the information is the key thing. Information is the key nugget. If you don't have information, you cannot do any of the AI, you cannot do any of the things. Social media can be that source of information for time-critical information. As a time-critical information source, we can use social media for early warning, event detection, event monitoring, and it opens up thousands of new opportunities. Artificial intelligence, we see that it's very helpful. This is the applied research at its best. If you are interested in applied research, this is the best thing to do. AI plus human in the loop can enable rapid crisis response. We showed you that, we proved that. And these techniques can be useful for situational awareness, actionable information extraction, and summarization. And with that, I thank you all for listening, and I'm open to questions.